there's this big passage. I don't say it's a big passage, but there's a passage. It may be a couple pages long, Mirin, where you're talking about the 84 draft. And like, I guess the greatest compliment to Hakeem Olajuwon is that for everyone to talk about Sam Bowie as the number 2 pick in Portland, and Portland should have taken Michael Jordan and everything else, nobody says the Houston Rockets missed by not taking Michael Jordan, the greatest player of all time. But there were so many different machinations of proposed trades, like the Lakers dangling James Worthy out to try to get to the top of the draft. The Houston Rockets possibly having both Hakeem Olajuwon and Michael Jordan and getting them in the same draft. The possibility of the Bulls getting John Stockton and Michael Jordan in the same draft. Like, how fascinated were you by the history that could have been made rather than the history that was made?
Man, it was so fascinating because, to your point, I think it really speaks volumes that to this day, nobody is like, oh, the Rockets should have taken Jordan. Like, Hakeem will always be Houston, like a cult hero, a mythical figure almost, like beloved beyond. And I just love that to this day, that remains the case. Talking with the people that were intimately involved in the draft, like on the Bulls side, for a long time, they didn't know whether, they were going to get the first pick or not. Like the coin flip, it was so different back then. And that's because after this draft, because they got Hakeem and Ralph Sampson back to back, 2 Twin Towers #1 picks, everyone's like, okay, the Rockets tanked. We can't let this happen again. But for the moment, the Bulls people are like, yeah, if we had the #1 pick, we were picking Olajuwon. There's no question. Like even after they picked Jordan, somebody in management told Rod Thorne, like the GM at the time, like, I hope this works out. Think about that. Like Jordan wasn't Jordan. He was great. He had a relentless drive, but he wasn't. They didn't know he'd become that. And I think, I absolutely, I know you do too. I hate in sports media when, somebody blows up and they're like, oh, we actually wanted him. No, he was on our board. No, he was in the top. And it's like, he wasn't even in your top 15. But truly, Olajuwon was everybody's #1. And even though all those proposed trades and things that you were saying, was in the mix, like the Sixers were even somewhat involved. It definitely, from Houston's side, they're like, it's the plan all along to get 2 7-footers. Like, even though there had been similar players of, stature, not of 7'4" and near 7 feet with that type of mobility. That was just a creativity and agility, nimbleness, is that a word? That you've never seen before. And so I just think that is fascinating. Like, they were dead set on him.
I mean, I was thinking about this when I was reading it, because we all go and do these redrafts, or not redrafts, but if this draft happened today, like we do that thing with today's rules and today's game. I still think if you give a team the option, knowing what Hakeem Olajuwon turns out to be, knowing what Michael Jordan turns out to be, the greatest player of all time, you still might take the 7-footer or 7-foot-ish player first, even in today's game, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's weird because Olajuwon, so like he wasn't developed offensively the way that he would become. So they were picking him based off of defensive prowess and potential. Like Rudy Tomjanovich told me, he was like, look, we hoped he would pan out offensively, but it was a nice surprise that he developed so quickly. I think nowadays it's so hard because what does even being a center mean in 2024? Like when I saw Zach Edey the other night, like doing a little jump hooks, I was like, I mean, I love him. Like I profiled him. He's great. But like, it was weird to me. I just hadn't seen that type of thing in a while. So, I don't know, like, could there be another near 7-footer with that type of agility and bring the center position back? Maybe. I don't know. It's interesting to see how the game has changed so much.
I think if you tell me that there's a player with the offensive talents, by and large, of Nikola Jokic and the defensive prowess of Rudy Gobert and with better feet than Rudy, you're taking the 6'10" guy, right? Because I'm throwing the ball down to your big ass in the post and the floor is spread and you got shooters all around. Food, I tell you. Food, David Robinson. Food, Shaquille O'Neal. Food to every... Like, Mirin, I'm like a geek, right? And was just like happenstance. I'm a geek. There's this a YouTube account, and I can't think of the name of it, but it pops up in my algorithm every now and again. And it pulled up the 95 Western Conference Finals. But it just did exactly the David Robinson versus Hakeem matchup. It was just a cut up of the entire series of those two going head to head. And that's an MVP, David Robinson, maybe the most athletic center we've ever had. And he dog walked that man. Embarrassed. I felt bad for him.
I literally, and the quotes, reading back the quotes from after, he looked like this helpless puppy that was just kind of like, I'm doing my best. Like, I don't know. Because that's the thing. Like, David Robinson was a prolific shot blocker, amazing defensive player. He had the height advantage, but Hakeem was like, not going to be denied. He's like, I have waited 10 years to get a championship. Like, I'm going through you. I'm literally going through you. So, I mean, when I watched it, as a writer, you know how hard it is. It's hard when the moves are simple. But when somebody does like 500 up fakes and, twisting this way and that, like, how many times can you say spun, turned, put him in a blender, put him in a pretzel? Like, the thesaurus was like not helping me out for the Hakeem book.
All the superlatives. No, all the superlatives. Right. Like when I think of, and we don't get the mano-a-mano matchups anymore in today's game because dudes, y'all scared to get embarrassed. You don't want to take your matchup. You don't want to eat your 40, right? You don't see that. Like like we saw MJ and Clyde, right?
Right.
Sorry, Clyde, right? But Hakeem against David Robinson, like I can't even think of anything comparable in NBA history where player versus player, we're both around the same age or around the same experience. You know what I mean? Like Hakeem was a little bit older than David Robinson was, but David was in his prime. I can't think of a single matchup of comparable players where one guy completely destroyed somebody. And we don't talk about it enough. We don't.
I know, but think of the 80s era that Hakeem was raised on, right? This is the era of the bad boys. This is the era of there are two referees and you can punch people. Like this, he was so like built for battle that like nobody intimidated him. So I think by the time he gets to the, 94, 95, he's like, he knows he's him. Like he doesn't have to, there's just, I think with him, and this is what I tried to really convey in the book, there's a playfulness with him. Yes. There is that sense of playing pickup, like, oh, I'm going to embarrass you. This is fun for me. I think nowadays it's like, oh, we're nervous. How do we do? Da, da, da. Like for him, you felt like he was just in a pickup game, just having the time of his life.
Look, when he told, I can't remember what referee, maybe it was Ed Rush or someone else, when he was telling him at first, God will judge you for a bad call. And then he ran into the ref again and he was like, maybe God got some better things to do besides judging me for this call.
I had to interview the refs. Because one ref said he told me God will punish you. I'm thinking like, no, he didn't. And then I was like, no, I'm going to ask the other one. And he said the same thing. And I was like, oh my God, he really said this. And then there was already a meme on Twitter. And I was like, no, don't create a meme. It's going to be out of context. But yes, that the pre-return to Islam Hakeem definitely let the refs know how he felt.
He said, look, well, the one thing, and John just put it in here. I remember when Kevin Garnett had said on his podcast with Paul Pierce, I'm going to hit him with lateral movement. He's like, and that's old Hakeem Olajuwon. That's pinstripe jersey Hakeem Olajuwon. That's not Hakeem with the goggles. You know what I mean? That's
so
older.
Good. It's so, okay, one of my favorite, you remember in the early chapters at the University of Houston, and he's like, he knows English, so it's not like he's learning English, but he's learning basketball terminology, and his teammates are like saying, I'm going to rock your world, and Hakeem like does something amazing, and he goes, now I'm going to rock your world, like really proper, with the influence of British on Nigerian boarding school, and I was laughing so hard, just like picturing him saying that, and I'm like, wow, like he could destroy you in the most eloquent of ways. Eloquent.
I'm going to hit you with lateral movement. I'm going to do that.
I'm going to hit you with lateral movement.
I'm going to hit you with lateral. I'm going to do that once. I'm going to say that about somebody once. It ain't going to be playing ball because at this age, if I hit somebody with lateral movement, I'm going to be lateraling my ass to the EMS. But when we come back.
MCL tears here.
Both of them. ACL, MCL, ankle. We got to put your whole leg together, son. Lateral movement, dog. That's what you doing, lateral movement.